Hello, everybody. Welcome to our workshop. My name is Tomas Gonzalez. I'm accompanied with a great crew that I'll introduce here once we kick off. We're excited that you're joining us for our workshop around application modernization with AWS, Docker, and Snyk. So gonna keep giving a couple of people, I think, what do we think, participants? Are we good to everybody that has arrived is gonna come in, or fellow moderators? Shall we kick it off? Lovely.
I'm ready to go.
I see a lot of nods.
Sounds good.
All right. So, all right. Hello, everybody. Happy KubeCon. Hope you're enjoying like what's going to be an awesome show. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tomas Gonzalez. I will be your MC for this workshop. And this one's titled Application Modernization with AWS, Snyk, and Docker. Along here with me today to guide us through this workshop, as well as to assist with the facilitation, we have various people from AWS. We have Yaniv, we have Anuj, we have Andrew, we have Eugene, and we have Young. From Docker, we have Peter McKee, who's stealing the spotlight right now with the camera. We see you. And then from the Snyk side, we have myself, now Eric Smalling, Sarah Conway, David Lugo. We're all here to, make sure you enjoy this workshop and that you can work through the content successfully. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We will have, I'm gonna share my screen. We have a workshop guide that we will be following today. It's accessible at docker-snyk.awsworkshop.io. I will share this into the chat so that you all can access it. This will have the instructions for the workshop that we'll be following today. During the workshop, we'll be working in the AWS Cloud9 Web IDE. Anuj will walk you through setting this up initially. What we recommend for the best experience is you split your screen in half and you work with your Cloud9 environment either on the left or right, whatever your preference is, and you have the instructions on the left. That way, as you work through the workshop, you can read the instructions, interact with Cloud9, and not have to do a lot of switching back and forth. If you have two screens, even better. Definitely recommend having both windows open as you work through the content. Okay, so this workshop is broken up into 4 parts. First part is the prerequisites. We're going to walk you through getting the Cloud9 environment ready. Anuj from AWS will be facilitating this portion. It's going to be all about installing what we're going to need to build some Docker images and deploy them to Kubernetes. And so after Anuj goes through the prerequisites, Peter from Docker will walk us through building a set of containers and deploying them to Kubernetes. So we're going to have a sample application that will clone the code for into the Cloud9 environment and build a couple of container images, push them to Docker Hub, and then deploy them. We're going to have a running application on Kubernetes. In Module 2, Eric Smalling from Snyk will walk us through some of the risks that our deployed application has. At first glance, you'll notice it'll look like a harmless application. It works, everything's fine. But in Module 2, we're going to walk you through hacking into this application, exploiting an active vulnerability in the container that runs it, and illustrate some of the risks that surfaces. And then, of course, we're going to fix it. And then in Module 3, I'll walk you through some other risks that are introduced into our application, this time from the open source dependencies that are being bundled as part of it. And then same thing, we're going to exploit the vulnerability, and then we're going to fix it. Just to show you how you can get started finding and fixing vulnerabilities, combining the tools that AWS, Snyk, and Docker provide. So for those that joined in the middle of my introduction, we're here, we're happy to have you. The instructions for the workshop have been shared into the Zoom chat. We highly recommend that you split screen the windows. That way you can read through the instructions on one side of the screen and work on the Cloud9 IDE during the workshop. And then, of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to us over Zoom chat. We are here to help. And we have a great number of assistants from the Snyk, Docker, and the AWS side to make sure everybody has a good experience in today's workshop. So without further ado, I believe I covered a lot of the introductory material. Moderators, anything that I missed? I think we're good to get started, yes?
Let's go.
Let's go for it.
All right. So first up, I'm going to hand it over to Anuj. Anuj will help us all get started on the AWS Cloud 9 environment. He'll walk us through some of the prerequisites, such as installing the tools and dependencies that we'll be using throughout the workshop. So without further ado, fire up your workshop guides and follow along as Anuj takes you through the prerequisites. Anuj, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas, and welcome everyone. Happy KubeCon. I hope everyone is having a great day and looking forward for the exciting content that we have put up. Hope you will find it useful. So to get started, we will go through the prerequisites to begin with. Let me share my screen so that we can get started. I would highly recommend if you can follow along the guides that we are going through. The link has been shared in the email. Is everyone able to see my split screen, which has one side the workshop and the second side just a blank screen, right? Awesome. All right. So we will go through the prerequisite section to begin with. What I'm going to do is share a specific link in the chat. I would this is the link that you would actually use to provision your own AWS account. We want to vend out a personalized experience when you are running through this workshop so that no one can interfere with each other's work that you're doing. So in order to facilitate that, we are using a service called Event Engine, which will provision unique accounts for each and every individual's on each and every participant. So let me first share. Share the link in the chat. There you go. So everyone should have the link now. So what you would do is click on that link. That will take you to a sign-in page. Now you would want to sign in either with an email one-time password or log in with Amazon. I'm going to use email one-time password, which will send an OTP to my email ID and wait for that to complete. All right, so we are at the event and I'm going to enter my email ID. All right, so meanwhile, I wait for this specific email to arrive. Everyone should be also doing the same. What this will give me access to my as I said, this will give me access to my personalized AWS account that we will create for you. And we will go through instructions to create a desktop in cloud using a service called AWS Cloud 9. And let us wait. Did anyone having any problems in reaching this link so far? Or everyone is good?
Everybody, we're gonna fire off a poll shortly, just to make sure everybody was able to sign up using the event engine. Please let us know how you're doing. And once you're able to create your accounts, we'll be ready to go. If you need help, reach out on the chat. As Anu showed, what this is doing is just setting you up with an AWS account for the purposes of this workshop. So I see lots of responses coming in. Everybody seems to be on track. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Anu.
Awesome.
Back over to you.
Awesome. So I received the link. I received the OTP. And I'm going to provision, I'm going to create the and log into my AWS console. You would actually click here to log into AWS console and go to the link which says Open AWS console. And that will sign you to your specific individual AWS account. Once you log into your specific AWS account that you received, make sure that you have selected the region as US East 1. And it should be, if anything else is selected, just go back and select US East 1. That's because the instructions in the workshop are specifically tweaked for the needs of US East 1 North Virginia region. So if you select anything else, you will encounter problems. So that is why ensure that you have selected US East 1 as the region. All right. Next, once you have selected the region, next step would be to create a specific workspace using AWS Cloud9. I'm going to use console just to give a walkthrough how the experience looks like. You can actually search for Cloud9. If you don't see anything in the recently used services, I have used the service in class. That is why it is appearing as the recently used services. So click on AWS Cloud9 as a service here and click on create a new environment. Give it a name of Docker-workshop. Ensure that you select this name only, as the warning says here. Ensure that you select the name as Docker-workshop and click on next step. And next step is we will select the type as what is mentioned here in the guide. So the instance type we will select as T2 large, and we will click on the other instance type and do T2.large. And platform as Ubuntu server. Now, this is very important that we make sure and modify this platform and select as Ubuntu server. Again, the reason behind that is the instructions in the workshop are tweaked for Ubuntu server. If you select anything else, it is likely that you will not be able to proceed further. So make sure that you're selecting T2 large and Ubuntu server as the platform. If you select anything else, you will end up having problems in the workshop. So please do that. I see a hand going up. Anyone? Can we take that?
I've reached out over chat.
Got it. All right. So I will continue, and I'll take a quick pause here. Just to make sure that everyone is following along, or are there any problems anyone is having to log into Event Engine or reaching till this step?
So to recap, for those that joined us after Anuj started, we're using a service called the Event Engine from AWS to create AWS accounts for the purposes of this workshop. So please sign up using the Event Engine. This will be different than your personal AWS accounts. And then once logged into the Event Engine, you'll be in the AWS console. Anuj is in the prerequisites section of the workshop guide, which I will reshare to the chat so that everybody that joined recently has it at the bottom of the chat list. And we're in the first step of the prerequisites, creating our Cloud9 environment. So thank you, Anuj. If anybody, and we're assisting in the chat, if anybody needs help, please let us know in the chat, or raise your hand, we will reach out.
All right. So again, I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing on this part a lot, because please make sure that the platform that you're selecting is Ubuntu server and you're selecting T2 large. All right. You can leave the rest all values as default, no need to modify that, and click on next step and create environment. This will take around a minute or two to get provision. Now, quick talk about what is AWS Cloud9. AWS Cloud9 is a desktop service in cloud. And what this will give you is provision the Cloud9 software on top of the Ubuntu-based image that you have selected. The beauty of using AWS Cloud9 is there are many products which come as pre-installed. So imagine that if you are using an enterprise, if you're in an enterprise environment, you have around hundreds of developers, and you want to provision a standard image for everyone. It makes it easier for the administrator. It makes it easier for the administrator to actually make sure that the instances are patched, the instances are upgraded, as well as there is a standard baseline of the product which is getting installed. The next good thing about using Cloud9 is the security. And security is the day zero for anyone who is interacting with AWS or here at AWS. What you will see in the entire workshop is we are not interacting with any of the security keys or access keys in order to create a specific AWS resource or delete a specific AWS resource. Everything is happening with the temporary keys or temporary tokens which are issued. And it uses the instance profile. It uses the role that we are going to attach to the instance. Which is why there are absolutely no access keys. Behind the scene, Cloud9 uses a service called a token service, which provides you a short-lived token in order to interact with AWS, and which is why zero interaction with access keys, to be very specific. Right? All right. Let's move ahead. So my Cloud9 environment is provisioned. Feel free to do a little bit digging around and get familiarize yourself with the environment. Most of the times in the entire workshop, we will be either using the console and using the IDE that it gets shipped with. All right, let's move on. Once I have created the environment, what we're going to do is move along and increase the size of the EBS volumes, which are attached to my Cloud9 instance. And the reason why we are doing is initially when we provision the Cloud9 instance, just to save cost, we provision with 10 gigs of size only. However, in this workshop, we are going to we will run out of the space because of the Docker commands that we are using, because the images that we are using, because of the builds that we will be doing, which is why we recommend that we should increase the size of the EBS volume. And in order to do that, we have created a script. What you will do is create a file called resize.sh. In order to do that, just follow along with the instructions, and I'm going to do it for you. Create a file called resize.sh and create the content of resize.sh. Oops, I'm going to save this. Control-Alt, save, and save resize.sh. Don't forget to save it. You'll see that small green button disappears once you do save. Once you save it, and then execute it in the terminal. This will take around 15-20 seconds if I'm not wrong. All right, you'll see a message like 5 seconds to resize the disk, and now the base size of the EBS volume attached is 20 gigs. You can run lsblk to make sure that it got updated. So you'll see here it's now 20 gigs. So ready to move forward. Ensure that in the entire workshop, this is the very first step that you are doing after you create the workspace. So just follow along with the entire guide. Resizing the workspace or resizing the EBS volume for the Cloud9 environment should be the very first step that you do after you create the Cloud9 environment. If you miss to do that step, and if you do it later in the entire workshop, you will have problems. You'll see failures like you're not authorized to run this command, and you're not authorized to describe volume modification. and that will be the exact error message that you will see. So make sure that as soon as you create the Cloud9 instance, do the resizing. I'll take a quick pause if there are any specific question or if everyone is able to follow along.
We've had a couple of questions coming in chat, but
Yes.
they're being fielded at the moment.
Got it.
So we should
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I will move along. So once we are done with the resizing, once you are able to see that your EVS volume attached is 20 gigs, move on to the next step, which is attach the IAM roles to your workspace. And in order to do that, click here. Click here and go to your dashboard. Go to services. Go to EC2. You can use the deep link, but for the purposes for everyone's understanding, I'm navigating through the link here, and click on the Cloud9. You'll see 3 instances getting created, but we want to make sure that you're selecting AWS-Cloud9. Clicking on actions. Clicking on going to security and clicking on modify IAM role. In the drop down, select the one which starts with MOD. If you select anything else, you will not get enough permissions in order to connect to your EKS cluster that we have provisioned for you. So make sure that you select the one that select the one which we have created, which starts with MOD start. Once you create that, select that, click save. If you want to verify if it has been modified, click on that Cloud9 instance, go to security. You'll see the IAM role has been modified to something like MOD star. Now come back to the workshop, come back to your Cloud9 environment and select the gearbox icon on the top right-hand side of your screen. Again, I repeat, once you come back to your Cloud9 environment, select the gearbox icon on the right-hand side. Once you click that, scroll down to AWS settings and uncheck the very last option, which is AWS manage temporary credentials. You will see that checked, you would want to uncheck it. Now, quick background why we are doing this, to be very specific. This seems to be a lot of like two or three different steps from a security standpoint, but why are we doing this? In this workshop, we are going to use EKS cluster, Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service, and that cluster is pre-provisioned for you. When we create the specific cluster, it has to be attached to a specific IAM role, which has admin access. What we did right now is started using that Cloud9 environment with the IAM role, which has admin access on the EKS cluster. If you don't follow this step, what will happen is EKS, to be very specific, uses role-based access control, and the IAM role which is attached to the instance will not have access to connect to the EKS cluster, which is why doing this step makes sure that you are able to connect to the EKS cluster that you have created. Right? There's no need to save once you just turn it off. You can close the preference screen. And that's it. Once you're attached to the IAM role, that should be it. You can install. Next step is doing the installation of the kubectl commands. So
real quick pause.
Yes.
Everyone, what the step Anuj just showed in Cloud9 is accessible from the upper right corner. It's actually also in the workshop guide as update IAM settings for your workspace. So that last step that Anuj did kind of got super excited and bundled it into together with a separate step for disabling the managed credentials. But for those asking in the chat, what Anuj just showed after switching the EC2 IAM instance IAM role in the console, it'll also be in the instructions after update IAM settings for your workspace. So if you didn't catch it now, it's okay. You'll get to it in a future step.
Got it. And my bad. I thought it's probably better to include that in from a continuity standpoint.
You were just so excited.
All right. So let's follow along and complete this step as I was going through this step. Once you turn the AWS managed temporary credentials, oops, let me close this. Let's execute this command and run this. And now it's time to run this, copy this, and AWS kubeconfig. And that's the final drumbeat. If you're able to do kubectl, I guess I will not be able to do kubectl, so I need to install that too. I think I messed it up here. So no worries. So I'll go back one level up and install the kubectl tools. All right. Update AWS CLI. Get the batch completion. Install YQ. Verify the binaries are in the correct path. So you should see in the end kubectl in the path, JQ in the path, environment substitution in the path, and AWS in the path. And that will make sure that these, and we are going to use these tools in the exercises. So make sure that you see this message in the end, and finally enable batch completion. Once you have installed this tool, the final drumbeat, go over these steps to turn off the temporary credentials, run this command to remove anything which is lingering around, update kubeconfig, and that's gonna update the kubeconfig locally so that you can connect with the cluster that we have created. And the final step is kubectl get nodes. So let's run this. And if you're able to see the cluster, if you're able to see an IP here, and if you're able to see a response from kubectl get nodes, that means that yes, you have successfully gone through the security steps and you're ready to move forward further. So I'll take a quick pause here if anyone has any questions or anyone is having any troubles in getting to this step.
We've had a couple of people join and a couple of questions come through the chat. Those of you that joined, welcome. The workshop guide has been published in the chat. We are also using the event engine for creating AWS accounts. So if you're following through this workshop, please create your AWS account using the event engine, using the link provided. Anuj is currently walking through the prerequisites. We're nearing the end of the prerequisites, and we will take a pause and a poll at the end of the prerequisites to make sure everybody's caught up before continuing over to module 1. So continue to work through the instructions. It's okay if you're a little bit behind. We're gonna give you a time to catch up before initiating module 1.
All right, I will move to the next step, and I want to complete these 3 steps so that in the end we give back some time so that everyone can complete the prerequisites. Next step is creating the Snyk account. You can, if you have the Snyk account already, you can indeed skip this step. But what you want to make sure is you're able to export your Snyk token. So log into the Snyk. Create a Snyk account if you don't have. We have the links here provided. I have my Snyk account already created. So I will go navigate to the account settings page. And I'm going to use my Docker ID in order to connect here. All right, I'm going to use my key, as it says, go to the account settings page and save your API key for the environment. It's fine. I'll use this. I'll destroy this token later on. So Snyk token, export it here, put it here as Snyk token equals to this. All right. Once you have exported it, that's good. Again, if you don't have a Snyk account, create a Snyk account. If you have a Snyk account, go to the Snyk account settings, save the API key as it mentions here, and export it to the terminal. Next step, creating a Docker Hub ID for yourself. I have my Docker Hub ID already created, but if you don't have a Docker Hub ID, log into Docker Hub using the link that is provided. Sign up for a Docker Hub ID, and that should be it, and save it for the future. Export the Docker Hub ID in the terminal as Docker Hub ID equals to your Docker ID. That's it. And the final step is configuring Docker on Cloud9. So as I said initially, the Cloud9 environment does get shipped with a Docker engine. However, we want to make sure that we are up to date with the tooling that we are going to use in this workshop, which is why we are going to run few scripts to make sure that we have the up-to-date tooling which are used in the workshop. So let's follow along, create a file called install docker.sh. See, that should create it first. And then copy paste the contents here. So install docker.sh, double click and copy paste the contents. You'll see it is not saved currently. Do Command S, Control S to save it. And don't forget to save it, otherwise it will not work. And in the end, run the installer script. Should be fairly quick. All right, so you'll see in the end, we installed, upgraded the Docker Engine community version, and that should be 20.10.6. That is all everyone should be seeing. In the end, once we have done it, next step is to authenticate with the Docker Hub. So run this command, which is going to log you in with the Docker Hub ID, with your specific Docker Hub ID. Enter your password. Login succeeded. Scroll down. Next step is checking the Docker Scan plugin version. So I'll copy this and save it. Docker Scan version. And you'll get a message, Docker Scan relies upon to Snyk as a third-party provider, and you consent to wish to proceed further to Snyk. Select yes. So you'll see the version of Docker scan is version 0.7.0. However, in this specific workshop, we will use Docker version 0.8.0. There are some enhancements which have not yet made to the Docker engine executable, which is why we'll install the Docker Snyk version and make sure that it points to v0.8.0. So let's install that. That should be it. And if you run Docker scan version again, you'll see it's getting bumped to v0.8.0. Let us verify that. So yes, now it has gone to v0. Make sure that your version is v0.8.0. If you still see v0.7.0, that means that you have not completed this specific step, which actually installs the latest version of Docker scan. So ensure that you complete this step and run Docker scan to see the version to be 0.8.0. And the last step is configuring a Snyk account token. So we will log in with the Snyk account token that we have already saved as this. So your account has been authenticated. Snyk is now ready to be used. Yay. That's great. I think we'll take a quick pause and we'll continue with module 1 with Peter. Peter, over to you.
Oh, so Anuj, thank you for walking over the prerequisites. Everybody, we're going to fire off a poll similar to what we did at the beginning to make sure where everybody's following along, or if you need a little bit more time. We're going to wait a few minutes before continuing. So for those of you that are caught up, good time to stand up, stretch, do a little bit of breathing, stretch around, get some water before we kick off module 1. Whoever's stuck, please reach out in the chat. One of our moderators will be happy to help you out. So to recap, before we dive into module 1, so to recap what we did in the prerequisites, we created our AWS game day accounts. So these are new AWS accounts. Please do not use your personal AWS accounts for this workshop. Otherwise, the instructions won't work fully. So create your AWS account. You will create your Cloud9 IDE. After creating the Cloud9 IDE, we did a little bit of volume resizing magic to give us a little bit more space on the Cloud9 IDE. That way we can build some Docker images without running into space constraints. After that, you changed the IAM role for the Cloud9 IDE runs in an AWS EC2 instance, a virtual machine. So you replace the IAM role in the for the virtual machine with one that allows us to communicate with the Kubernetes cluster that we'll be using through this workshop. So that's a very important step. If you're stuck on any of the kubectl commands, double check that you've assigned the correct IAM role as described in the prerequisites step 3 for attach the IAM role to your workspace. Then after we did that, we installed some tools in the Cloud9 environment that we'll be using through this workshop. This includes the kubectl tool that we'll use to interact with our Kubernetes cluster. We installed Docker. That way we can also do Docker scan. We authenticated it to Snyk. So everything that's been done to now is to get your Cloud9 environment ready for the modules that are to come. So with that, if you're stuck, please let us know in the chat. We're gonna resume in another 5 minutes or so. So again, feel free once you're caught up, get some water, stand up, stretch, and we're here to help in case you need us. So the IAM role, to answer the question in chat, the IAM role that you should be using, Anuj, I don't know if you can reshare your screen one more time for the EC2 dashboard. It's the one that starts with MOD. There, you'll be using an IAM role that starts with MOD dash bunch of random characters. So when you're in the EC2 instance or in the EC2 console looking for the right IAM role for your instance, please make sure to select that one. So Anuj will demonstrate which one it is real quick. So you'll go to EC2, find your instance. Make sure you're changing it for the one called AWS Cloud9 Docker Workshop.
Yep. And go to Actions, go to Security, go to Modify IAM Roles, and you should be selecting the one which says MOD star, MOD dash. Don't select anything else. Select the one which says MOD dash.
Beautiful. And then once you have selected this one, the other step in Cloud9. So after installing the Kubernetes tools, this is step 5 in the prerequisites. Out of the box, Cloud9 has some default temporary managed credentials that it'll assign to the workspace. We have to tell Cloud9 to instead use the credentials that we just assigned to it. So step 5 in the prerequisites is all about going into the AWS settings in Cloud9 and disabling those temporary managed credentials. So make sure those are the 2 permission related things that you'll need to do. Number 1 is set the correct IAM role to the instance, and number 2 is disable the temporary managed credentials in Cloud9.
In order to disable the temporary managed credentials in Cloud9 is go to Cloud9, go to the right-hand side gearbox icon, and scroll down to AWS setting. Don't click on AWS configuration. Go to make sure that you're selecting AWS settings, and inside AWS settings, there is a credentials section, and this should be turned off. It should not be green, but it should be red.
Thank you, Anuj. And then if you want to double check and verify that you are using the correct role, there is a command that you can run in the Cloud9 console to get the caller identity. So I'll share it with the chat in case, I messed that up. What is it? STS, AWS STS, not ITS. I'm not smart.
All right, so you can actually see that command here itself, which is AWS STS get caller identity. And if you paste it here, it should be, again, something starting with MOD star, MOD dash. Beautiful. Here. All
right.
So if you see anything else which starts with like I dash something, that means that you have not done this step correctly. It should be something with assume role MOD dash.
Beautiful. So moderators, can we fire off the poll one more time? Let's take a pulse of the audience and see if everybody's up to date. All right. This is looking good. Right. So with that, we've given a few minutes. We'll give it an extra minute. Somebody is stuck and could use help. If you're stuck, can you please reach out in the chat? Yeah, and to answer the question, yes, we will have breaks between the modules. This is technically our first break between the prerequisites and module 1. So if you'd like, before we get started with module 2, now's a chance to just stand up, stretch, and do some squats or something. So a couple of other questions that have come up. The reason we're using Docker CE instead of Docker Desktop is Cloud9 is a Linux-based environment. So there is no Docker Desktop for Linux. Instead, we're using the Docker engine. Peter from Docker, did I cover that well? Did I properly represent what we're doing?
That was excellent.
Woo. Beautiful. All right. So let's make sure. Okay. Ooh, Olaf, you're way ahead on the workshop. Nice. Ambition. I like it. So make sure if you push the image to, we'll get to that in module 1. So I think that might be our cue, that it's almost time to fire up module 1. Some people are getting excited. I like this. So Peter, I think, if everybody's feeling pretty good, I believe we got mostly resounding yeses on the poll, that everybody's up to date. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Peter McKee from Docker, overall generally super cool dude. And he's going to be walking us through how to taking a sample application, building a couple of Docker images for that application, and pushing it into Kubernetes so that we can access it in a running environment. So Peter, thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to you to walk us through module 1.
Awesome. Thank you, Tomas. Alrighty, let me share and we'll get started. All right, moderators, can you see my screen? Excellent. Move Zoom out of the way. Okay, so module 1, hopefully everybody's getting caught up and moving along. Like Thomas said, we're gonna build a couple images, then we'll push those images into Hub, and then we'll deploy those into EKS. So I will try and go pretty slow. If you're having problems, like we've been saying all along, please reach out and chat and we'll get you help. So let's dive in. So the first thing we want to do is we want to grab the sample application. We want to fork it into our repo in GitHub. So you'll see a link right here to the Goof application. If you click on that, they'll bring you into GitHub. If you're not logged in, log in. And then you want to use this button right here, use this template, nice green one. So click on that and then name your app Goof.
Quick note before you create it, sorry to interrupt you, Peter.
Yeah,
for those of you, if you're using GitHub Enterprise, the default behavior is to create this repository as private. Make sure public is selected. This needs to be a publicly accessible repo for the workshop to work. Just a side note, sorry for cutting you off.
No, that's awesome, thank you. Okay, and so yes, make sure it's public and then we'll create the repository. While that's generating, take a look at your, if you don't know your GitHub ID, you can find it by dropping down the menu. And then here's your GitHub ID. So let's jump back. So we just clicked the use template. We found our GitHub ID. And now we're going to set our GitHub ID in the terminal. So I'm not going to copy the whole thing. I'm just going to copy GitHub ID so I get the correct case. And then back in your terminal in Cloud9, let me pull this up a little bit. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, so I'm gonna set the GitHub ID equal to pmckeytx. Enter, and then you can echo that out just to make sure. And get hub ID. And there we go. Then jumping back to the directions, we're gonna clone the code, the repo that we just created in GitHub. We're gonna clone that onto our Cloud9 IDE environment, and then we'll CD into that directory. So we'll use the copy right here, paste that in, and there we go. And now you can see I'm in Goof. If you expand back out your folders on the left, you'll see the Goof code has been pulled down into the environment. Okay. And now let's go on to the next step. Hopefully everybody's good with that. Again, I'm not looking at the chat, so reach out in the chat if you need help. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna build some images using a Docker file. I'm not gonna go into the details of a Docker file, but you can go ahead and read a couple of the Docker file here, and then we'll be building this image underneath the image-app, and you can find that Docker file here. Okay, let me clear the console out. Let's build the first one. Let me cd into image app. Okay, and you should see, again, you should see a Docker file right here. So now we're going to build this image. So I will copy the build command. Paste that in. So we're going to do a Docker build -t. That's for tagging. We're going to tag this image with my Docker ID. Remember, we set this a couple steps ago. And we're going to name it goof-image : latest, and then dot. So the dot is setting your context. That tells the Docker engine where to look for your Docker file and what files to use when building this image. So I'm going to hit enter. And since we're up on AWS, we get very fast pulls and builds. Here we go. Now we're building. We'll give that a second to run. Don't worry about all that red stuff going by. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out in the chat. Okay, so now we have an image. So let's type clear correctly. And now we're going to build the second image, our goof : latest. So let me go up a directory. Going to go back into the root of our code. And then I'm going to do a Docker build -t, give it my Docker ID, /goof : latest. And then we'll give the context again in the current directory. So again, the -t is how you tag your image or name your image, is sometimes how we call it out in the wild. So let me hit enter. And now we're going to build that image. This will take a couple seconds here. What it's doing is downloading the node 10.4 base image that we're using for this build. And now it's going to build it. And while that's running, I'll just talk a little bit about build generally. So a Docker file has a set of commands to build an image. You can think of it as a script that a lot of times when you're first coming to Docker and building images, you have your bash scripts or some kind of script that you use to install dependencies and your source code and all those things into your server. Well, this is a Docker file is slightly the same thing, right? It starts at the top and runs down each command in your Docker file. Let me open one up here while it's running. And it'll run down these commands, running each in turn and putting those into the image. And then at the end, you have that image. It's a very high level overview of building. Give it another minute here. And you can see running step 7 of 10, run npm install, and there it goes. So that was this line right here. Okay, looks like we're done. Let's clear and let's do this step is not in your documents, but we're going to list out our images. And there we go. You can see my 2 images that we just built right here at the top. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to push these images into Hub. And to do that, we got to make sure that we're logged in. So I'm going to copy my that command to log in. So we're log in here, docker login -u, and my Docker ID is my pmckeys. And that's going to ask for a password. Okay, that is telling you your password is going to be saved. So we usually recommend not using your password when you log in if you're on servers or CI/CD type things. If you want to learn more about that, stay tuned. So, all right, now we're going to push our images up into Hub. So let's push the goof-image : latest. So I will copy that, type it in here. So a Docker push does exactly that, pushes your image up into Hub. And there we go. And now I'll push our other image that we built. Let me copy this. Let me clear if I can type it. There we go. Nice and fast because we're sitting in AWS and the Hub is very close to that, let's say. And wait for it. There we go. Excellent. Okay. So just to recap real quick here. So we cd'd into image-app and built that image using that Docker file inside that image app folder. And then we came back up a folder and we built an image in our root folder. And then we logged into Hub, and then we pushed those images into Hub so we can share them and use them later. Okay, so last thing, let's take a look at Hub, and we'll make sure that our images are up there. So I'm already logged in. If you didn't create your Docker ID earlier, please do that so you can follow along in these steps. But once you're logged in, you should see the two images that we just built and pushed, and they're right here for me. So updated a minute ago. There's the goof and the goof dash image. All right, we look good there. So let's move on. So now we're going to make a couple changes to our cube files so we can deploy. So you want to open up Docker Workshop in goof into manifests and the goof dash deploy YAML file. Let's close this Docker file and then let's get a little more room here. And what we need to do is we refer this this goof-deployment.yaml file refers to our images we just built. So you can see that right here, image and Docker ID. So we need to go and replace these two Docker IDs for both of those images we just built. If you are copying this, which you shouldn't need to do, be careful of copying the comments. Sometimes we get errors, sometimes not. Okay, so let's find all of our Docker IDs. So we got our first one right here. Whoop, too many double clicks. So let's get rid of the placeholder, and I'll put in my Docker ID. I'm going to copy that. Scroll down a little bit, and here's the second one on line 50. So let's replace that. Okay, and then we'll save that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a couple namespaces, set up the config, and then we'll deploy everything. All right, let's make this a little bit bigger, close this back down so we can see. And I'll clear the console. Hopefully everybody's following along. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but just want to make sure that you know we're here to support you. So please do reach out. And moderators, let me know if I need to pause and show anything else. Okay, so I'm going to set up my namespace. So kube control create ns for namespace, sync-docker-aws. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay. Let's update our config. There we go. And now we are going to deploy. So kube control create -f in manifest, and you'll see you want to make sure you add the /. And I am in the goof directory, and the manifest is right here, and it's going to find these two files. Fingers crossed. There we go. So let's take a look here. Let me copy. Let's take a look at the status of our pods. Whoop, not a good copy. Oh, get all. We have one running. Let's give it a minute. Uh-oh, looks like I got an error image pool.
Okay, we had somebody in the chat that was running into this same issue. So let's troubleshoot this and double check. So can you go back to the manifest files, to the goof deployment YAML?
Let me close this down. Yeah. Give us some room.
Okay, so.
Oh, it helps to put the correct Docker ID in there. That's my GitHub ID.
Okay.
Let me save that. Okay.
While Peter rebuilds and repushes, or just scales the deployments down and up to that, and you can borrow a command from later on in the workshop if you want to do that, Peter, or just delete the namespace and recreate everything. You can do kubectl delete ns Snyk docker.
Actually, don't there's a faster way. Do delete-f manifests
There you go.
with the slash.
Oop, like that.
Yep.
There's many ways to do this.
Yeah, quite a couple.
Glad I have my K8s team on here with me.
Well, just to save face for Pete, I did the same thing during one of our dry runs, but my problem was I wasn't saving the file after I edited it. So even worse.
So I was going to say, if you're getting image pulled back off, that means that it's trying to reference an image that it can't find in the container registry. That could be due to many things. We saw Peter had the incorrect Docker ID referenced in there. So double check that. As Eric just said, double check that you're saving the file after you make the edits, because it is possible to make the edits and then not save the file, which will also confuse Kubernetes. So double check those two things.
Okay. So now I can redeploy here.
That looks better.
Container creating, that looks promising. Right, we'll give it a minute to create. Now, to see how everybody's doing, there's 2 steps left in what Peter's doing, but we're gonna go ahead and launch the poll that we've been launching. Just to let us know how you're doing. Is everything going so far? Are you a little bit behind? We'll be launching that in a second. But Peter, you can go ahead and finish your bit if it's ready.
Excellent day. Okay, so we now have them all running. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our load balancers, our goof LB and our goof image LB.
Hey, Pete.
Yes, sir.
One thing also for everyone to check on, not only do the pods need to be running, but the services, which is the next block, you need to make sure that the ones that have load balancer type, that the external IP has something like what you're seeing, not pending. That's the first point you run this, they will say pending for a moment while AWS provisions those load balancers. So
awesome. Okay. So let's grab our load balancers and save them into some environment variables. Good. Okay. And let's echo those out just to make sure. There we go. Fantastic. Success.
Beautiful.
All right. Let me stop sharing. I think we're going to take a pause here and let folks catch up. Did the I might have missed it. Did the poll come up?
Yep. So we're about to fire off. We just reached the end of module 1. We're about to, before we get started hacking into our container and exploiting vulnerabilities on there.
There we go.
Just let us know how you're doing. Are you following along? Are you a little bit behind? Do we need a little bit more time? Since we've reached the end of module 1, now is another time to stand up, get some water, stretch, get some food, do some squats, whatever, move around a bit. I see Peter doing some core right there. Very nice. And we're going to take a few minutes to help those that need it get caught up. And we'll resume with module 2 in about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how everybody's doing.
So I'm not sure I understand the last chat there. So I worked up to the end of step 4 and I'm shocked. Is that a good shock? Is it a bad shock?
I don't know if is step 4 all the way to the end of the workshop?
I don't know. I didn't.
Look at that. He's getting ambitious. That's what we're gonna do up next.
Yeah. Oh, he's shocked at the vulnerability, I think.
No spoilers.
Yeah, no.
Yes. Yeah. We're gonna show the real dangers.
No pressure on me. I have to shock everyone now.
Yeah, based on so Lisa, yes, there is part of the game day engine that we're using to create everybody's AWS accounts. When we switch the instance role at the very beginning, That's where we're also, that role has access or RBAC enabled for the Kubernetes cluster that we're utilizing. So if you have access to multiple Kubernetes clusters, you would update your kubeconfig according to the one for the cluster that you want to deploy or interact with. So in this case, we're trying to make it as easy as possible, providing the role, the cluster, the kubeconfig, everything. But if you had different clusters, you would set up your environment according to the cluster that you want to deploy into. AWS team, back me up here if I missed something or if I butchered.
No, absolutely right on, bang on. And just want to add to what Thomas mentioned, that let's say if we are creating the cluster, the role which creates the cluster automatically gets the admin access. So you would want not to do any changing the roles and whatnot, right? But at the same time, let's say if you want to grant any additional role who wants to access that cluster, you would want to modify the RBAC and grant that role access to the cluster, to be very specific, and then update the kubeconfig.
Awesome. Thank you, Anuj. So we'll continue with module 2 in a couple of minutes. Eric is going to be taking us through module 2. Mirko, no spoilers. Don't spoil what we're about to do in module 2. It's pretty cool to show it because it's a very sneaky vulnerability that might be present in your container-based image. But
prep for that right now.
Beautiful. But we'll continue with module 2 shortly. I'll give like 2 more minutes before continuing there. All right. What's up?
Oh, I was just going to say that Eric's, you mentioned my camera is on, but Eric has a way better video setup than me. I'm a little jealous with the blurring and the angle.
I'm jealous of your books.
You shouldn't be. They're all first grade readers.
Yeah. What do you got back there? Some Java? Some COBOL?
How dare you? I do have some building a 32-bit operating system, which is actually a fantastic book. And I'm an ex U.S. Coast Guardsman from 20 years ago, and it was written by a Coastie. But it's a really good book if you're interested about operating systems. There's some more that are super advanced, and I'm not that bright, so it's very basic, and it's really cool.
Awesome. A little bit too low level for Tomas.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's interesting if then you want to jump into learning Linux, right? Which I'm still learning. I'm definitely not a Linux systems developer for sure.
Beautiful. Hey, mods, could we fire off the poll one more time, just to make sure our participants are caught up before we get started with module 2. Anoop, welcome. Thank you for joining. To answer your question, the module 2 requires some of the stuff that was done in the prerequisites in module 1. So if you are welcome to join, but you can either observe from module 2, but if you want to follow along with the workshop, fire up the workshop guide, fire up your event engine account, and work through the prerequisites and through module 1. And you should be able to catch up around the middle of module 2, definitely in time for module 3. Ooh, Peter, you got an interest. I got DM'd asking what was the Linux book.
Oh, the operating system development book, or let me grab it.
Yeah, so
we'll do a little show and tell while we're waiting. Okay, so this one is a classic, but it is extremely intense and detailed. So I started there, but then I quickly moved to, you might be, now with Amazon, this is an excellent book. Now it's only 32-bit based, but the concepts are all the same. And it's got a CD-ROM. Yeah, excellent book.
I was gonna say CD-ROMs. Like, do they even
Yeah.
ship computers with those anymore?
And this one is very cool also. So virtual machine design and implementation in C and C++. And sorry for being backwards and everything, but this one talks about virtual machines, which are a lot more popular these days with a lot of our languages running. 3 excellent books.
So I just shared, thank you for sharing your books, Peter. So for new joiners, we shared the workshop guide as well as the event engine. If you're going to follow along with the workshop, please use the event engine to create your AWS account. Using your own AWS account will not work to the T, and you'll have to wait for a Kubernetes cluster and stuff to create. So use the event engine accounts for going through the workshop. And last we ran the poll, it looked like everybody for the most part is pretty caught up. If you are still stuck, please let us know in the chat. Be happy to get you up and running. But in the interest of time, I'd like to introduce Eric Smalling, one of our developer advocates at Snyk, who will walk you through exploiting a vulnerability in the application that we just deployed and how to fix it using our scanning capabilities built into the Docker engine. So Eric, over to you.
Awesome. I've been feverishly in the workspace that Peter set up, changing it over to my Docker Hub and ID and everything else. So let's see if I was successful.
I believe in you, Eric.
You see my screen, fellow moderators.
Looks good, brother. Can you command plus a bit to font it up?
I shall do that.
It shall be done.
Okay, so following along, Peter helped us create our images for the application and get them deployed into the EKS cluster. We should all be seeing that our pods are running and that services have load balancer external IPs, and we're going to move forward with it. So the first thing we're going to look at is, as developers, we are now tasked with having to deploy on top of these containers that have basically operating system package dependencies and whatnot on it. And that's a new domain for a lot of us. We have to be aware of what's in these containers, what software is running with them, and what vulnerabilities we might be introducing through that. Which can be a new arena for many of us because operations and security used to kind of own that. And now, since the Docker file is code, we start to own.
Sorry, Eric. I'm picking up a lot of static. I don't know if it is anybody else hearing it from the mod team.
Yeah, I'm hearing some static as well.
Yep.
Right.
I think it's stopped now. So.
All right. Sorry about that. Let's give it a shot.
How about now? Am I sounding better? Test. Check 1, 2, 3.
No.
There's some static coming through your microphone, like pieces of paper are rustling.
Sorry, folks. Give me just a second.
See, Eric's setup is so high tech, he needs to manually adjust everything.
Better or worse? Any difference?
So much better. 100%.
Okay. There's a potential that the power on that shotgun mic is dying, and I'll have to change a battery in the middle of this. So nothing like doing it live.
We got this.
Let me know if I start to break up again. So as I was saying, so we've got the application running. This application is actually made up, as you saw in the manifest. There's 2 deployments here. There's the main Goof app, which is a to-do app. And then there's this Goof image service. And in our contrived example, this is an old legacy web service or microservice, if you want to call it that is just in charge of taking images and resizing them for us. And to do that, it's using a package called ImageMagick. And what we're going to do is show you that the version of ImageMagick we're using might have some issues. So the first thing we're going to do is, with the application running, the command that's shown here is going to reach out and do an exec into the container in that pod. And we're simply going to do an ls on the default home directory that the application is running in. The little bit of magic in the middle here is just so we don't have to look up the pod name. It's doing it dynamically. So I'm going to paste that in. Let me, you asked me to raise my font size and I didn't do that. Let me do that for you. User settings, terminal, not. Grow this a bit. Is that better?
Yes, looks good.
All right. We don't really need to see this. So what we see here is I ran that. It did an LS inside the container, and we see these files and directories. You know, this is what's in that container. We could, you know, shell into it and do commands, but that's not really important right now. So next, we're going to take a look at in this repository under image app exploits. There's a JPEG file, and I'm going to cat that file, which normally would put out a bunch of junk. But in this case, this isn't actually an image. It's a kind of a script. And if you look closely, the important part in this script, that, what's relevant to this, is this pipe touch RCE1. That's not a normal thing you would see in a ImageMagick script. I'm not an ImageMagick expert, but this is a Unix command if you're familiar with Linux or Unix. Let's go ahead and we're going to do this curl, which is the equivalent of basically a form post. And we're going to push that image up to the upload service in the image. It kind of concats it together with my prompt, but you can see it says found, redirecting to. That's just the valid response back from the application. Now, if we go back and do that exec again, the same command we did earlier, we're going to take a look at what's in the pod container now. And you'll notice there's an RC1 file in there now. That touch created a file on the file system in my container. This is because we have what's called our remote code execution exploit in the ImageMagick module, basically, or package. Now, touch isn't that's pretty innocuous. Just being able to create a file isn't that big of a deal. However, you can imagine what else could I do? If I can do touch, if wget or curl or apt-get is in this in the file system of this container image, I can run those as well. And depending on what user we're running at inside the container, I could potentially apt-get install whatever I want. I could curl a script from my own server and run it and have it do whatever it wants, depending on what kind of access this has. It opens up a beachhead for a bad actor to do pretty much whatever they want now inside your cluster in that container. So how would I find this out? As a developer, how would I have kind of headed this off at the pass, if you will? This is where Docker scan comes in. So if we run Docker scan, I guess I should copy this instead of trying to type it all. I have updated my Docker ID. And before I hit, well, I'm going to hit enter because this takes a second. This is telling Docker's scan capability, which uses the Snyk container scanner inside of it, to look at this image, which is in this case, Eric Smalling / goof image latest. And then it's also giving a little hint to say, and that was built with this Docker file under image app. That helps the scanner to know where the layers came from, what the base image is. Now, those of you who might have looked at the Docker file that we're dealing with here know that it starts from node 610 Wheezy, which is hella old. This is a really old version of Node. And the reason we use this, a couple things. When you're dealing with legacy apps that have been containerized, you often deal with very old software. This one is so old, it's based on Debian 7. None of it is supported by the open source projects involved here, whether they be the Debian folks or the Node folks. And our scanner sees that and sees, hey, this is so old that it's not even supported. We have no real recommendations how to fix this. The Snyk scanner often will show better images to use. So in order to make this a little more relevant, let's go ahead and just jump to node 6. I don't want to break our APIs in our app or anything, but let's rebuild this container with node 6. So I'm just going to use VI because that's the kind of a geek I am. You could go into the editor in the tool if you wanted to, but you're going to open the Docker file under image app. And I like to just comment out what was there before, just that way. And I'm going to use node 6. Now, if you're familiar with Docker images, you'll know that that means go get the latest tagged node 6 from Docker Hub. Let's copy and paste. I need to go into the image app directory and then build it again. It's going to download the node 6 base image and redo the build. I'm not going to push this up yet. I just want to do a scan on it locally. So as soon as this is done, we'll do the same scan command, basically. We're in the image app directory now, so the file will point to the Docker file right here. And the reason, again, that I'm doing this is because Node 6 Wheezy was so old, we don't even have recommendations for it. And you might run into that, so I wanted to kind of exemplify that for you. So we now will run the scan, the same scan again with a Node 6 base. And we need like Jeopardy music right here. Tomas, that's your job. You're MC.
Dun, 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 dun,
Look at that.
dun, 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 dun.
Okay. This, of course, nothing like live demos. So I've seen this a couple times in Cloud9 where the output gets truncated. This is not usually you'd see the full report. We've kind of stopped mid-scan. To get around that, I'm going to output the report to a file, and we'll look at the file. Sorry about that. If this happens to you in your Cloud9 environment, as evidenced by the prompt being kind of slapped right against the end of the report, just try this, and that'll get us around it. We saw this start happening yesterday. We're not sure what in our environment changed to cause that.
Yeah, it sometimes happens. It sometimes doesn't happen.
I wasn't able to replicate it outside of Cloud9, so I'm sure it's something I broke. Okay, so that's done. Let's go ahead and open that scan text. And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. So, when it truncates, you don't get to see the bottom. So now that we are on an image that is on a version of Debian that's supported, honestly, we see that we have recommendations. We have the Snyk scan has reported that there are 229 high severity vulnerabilities. Now I could scroll up and look at all of these throughout here and find the image magic one that we're talking about. But for sake of time, I'll leave that to, you can take a look at it if you want. What's cool here, though, is that we're getting recommendations on what we could do to reduce the number of vulnerabilities we're seeing. There are 3 types of recommendation you'll get, and they're outlined in the documents. We have major, which could require a little bit of work, because in this case, we're going to node 15. So that might cause some compilation breakage. Who knows if your app is compatible with that. There's also, sometimes you'll see minor upgrade recommendations. There is not one in this case, probably because Node 6 is so old. And then there's alternatives, which are things, hey, you might try these because they have even better results as far as the base images and what kind of vulnerabilities they're bringing in. And the thing to look at here is that all of these vulnerabilities, if you look at that Docker file, I'm not adding any packages of my own. I'm just using the base. They're all being brought in by that base image. Just by using Node 6, for instance, we have an improper certificate validation issue. Now, you could go to this URL and take a look at the details on that. That's kind of outside of the scope of what we're talking about right now. But what I want to do is I want to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take the major update. I'm going to see if that's going to work for me. So I'm going to copy that. Switch pages. Now, as of the moment that we documented this, that was 14.16.1. This is one of the cool things about Docker Scan is every time you run it, it's going to use the Snyk vulnerability database, which is being constantly updated. Between last week when I wrote that paragraph and now, that number has gone up. So that's what this little info box says. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to YOLO and say, let's go to 15 and see if it works. Nothing like live demo, right? Let me get out of my file I'm looking at.
To the moon.
I'm going to re-edit that Docker file. I'm already in the directory, so edit it right here. And we're going to, oops, I paste the right thing. Go all the way to 15.14. And I'm going to rebuild again. And I'm going to cross my fingers that node 15 will compile with our app. And I apologize if I keep looking over here. My camera's kind of off axis from my monitor today.
Makes you look super sophisticated when you
That's
turn.
right. I'm really, you can tell I'm really doing this. I'm not just watching a quick time.
Exactly.
Hey, it compiled. Well, let's go ahead and push it. Okay, I'm going to cd up to the root directory again. And Tomas, jump in if anyone's got any questions or if I'm going too fast, let me know.
Had no questions coming in through the chat. I think you have everybody captivated and hypnotized.
So there's a few different ways to cause Kubernetes to redeploy on a new image. Since this is the same image name, this is a nice way to do it by just saying, hey, scale down to 0 for the goof image deployment, and then scale right back up to 1. That triggers it to, because we have image pull always set in the manifest, to always go back and check with the registry to see if there's anything new. It's not in the doc, but I'm going to go ahead and do another get all to see what my state is. So it's creating the new goof image. That's probably pulling it. That's what it's doing right now. And now it's running. So now I'm actually going to do this out of order. I'm going to do an ls just to prove we've got a new container image file system. It does not have the RCE1 in it anymore. Now let's go ahead and trigger the same exploit. We got the good response, and we'll just do the same exec again. Oops. Screen, there we go. And I do not see RC1. So the vulnerability no longer exists because we're now on a modern version of Node that doesn't package a bad version of ImageMagick. And we've fixed our exploit right from using the Docker scan. Now, this was a contrived example, obviously, but think of the example of, hey, Eric, developer, we just saw that this exploit is live in production. Can you figure out where it's happening? Well, just by running Docker scan, I can find out, oh, we've got a lot of vulnerabilities. Let's fix these things now and push out. Conversely, as I'm writing new code, being able to scan as I'm developing my code, like packaging this up as part of my build, I can find it right on my workstation before I even create the pull request to merge in. So that is the example. I see a question just popped in. Where does the 1514 come from? So that recommendation, so the Snyk vulnerability database is curated by our Snyk security team. And they look at every base image and figure out, okay, if you're on this, it has these vulnerabilities. Here's an option for moving up. And I don't know all of the algorithms and logic behind how it picks what it picks, but it presents all those different alternatives, major, minor versions, things like that, based on the metadata that our curators are putting into it. Hopefully that answered that question.
Real quick, we're at the end of module 2. Can we fire off a poll, make sure everybody is caught up and up to date while we do Q&A? This is also our time between modules. So we'll take like 10 minutes to make sure everybody's caught up before we go into module 3. But now's the time to do any sort of Q&A or help around module 2 so we can continue this. Wanted to give you all the heads up. Now's the time to stand up, stretch, do squats, and everything you would do between modules.
So how frequently does Snyk update its database? Tomas, David, do you know what's our corporate answer on that? I know it's all the time, but I don't know if there's like a schedule.
Yes, so the Snyk database is constantly updated. And so we listen to the National Vulnerability Database as well as other public trackers of vulnerability information. We also listen for comments on public Jira boards, GitHub commits, Stack Overflow, and other sources to figure out what vulnerabilities are being disclosed. And that's updated on a constant basis. That's why when Eric ran the scan last week, when we were putting the workshop together, the set of base image recommendations that are shown in the document are different than the ones that are shown now, most likely because new vulnerabilities have been disclosed that affect the packages in those base images. So that's why the recommendations are slightly different now.
Yep.
Because It's
One of the features of our tools, including the Docker Hub integration that we have if you're on a team or pro tier Docker Hub, is that the vulnerabilities get updated all the time, and you can get a rescan without having to rebuild your code. Which leads into the next question that somebody asked about GitLab CI. Yes, absolutely. A lot of people use it from GitLab CI. Anything you can script, you can attach, you can use Docker Scan or the sister tool Snyk test, which is what's being run inside of Docker Scan from any stage of your CI systems. Some CI systems we have deeper integration with plugins, but I definitely know people are using it with GitLab all the time.
Does Snyk scan the local image, or is there a correlation between the image being on Docker Hub? So what we'll do when you run the Docker scan command, if the image is available on the local Docker cache, we scan that one. So we'll pull that image, we'll explore it, figure out all the packages that it introduced. If the image is not in the local Docker cache, then we pull it from Docker Hub and scan it. Whether the image is in Docker Hub or in any other container registry, it works the same way. I hope that answered your question, Prenti. And as a developer, will I have an API wherein I can check on what new vulnerabilities are introduced? So if you import what Eric is showing you is a point in time scan. You are able to, in module 3, I'll show you how we connect Snyk to the GitHub repository where the application lives. And by doing that, if there are any new vulnerabilities that are disclosed for any of the open source components that are used in that application, Snyk will alert you and let you know that new vulnerabilities have been disclosed. We use Jenkins for CI, and instead of Docker daemon, we use podman to build. Can a scan be done using podman instead of Docker daemon? Eric, do you want to tackle that one?
Absolutely. The Snyk container test works with podman. That's the quick answer. My colleague Matt Jarvis blogged about that. I want to say December timeframe. If you go to the Snyk blogs and just put podman in the search, I think it'll pop right up.
Yeah. So I'll share the blog that Eric just referenced into the chat, because so that you have it. Actually, this is the one from the Red Hat blog, but it's still the same content. Did I send the wrong one? I'm pretty sure that's
yeah, I would go to the Snyk blog one.
Okay, I'll find it and send it. It's pretty much the same content. There we go.
It's an image scan. As long as it's an OCI compliant image, we can scan it.
Correct.
But the Docker integration is way cooler.
Yeah, the nice thing about the Docker integration is that it's there. You don't have to install Snyk. A couple of just side things while we're getting ready for the next module. In fact, I'll jump out of the screen share here. The Docker scan, since it runs a containerized version of our scanner, that you don't have to do an npm install to install our tools to do it. Then, if you're not interested in doing open source code scanning, which is another facet of our tools, Docker Scan does it all for you. And as of this month, it's now available on Linux. And that's one of the reasons why we upgraded the plugin, is because I wanted you guys to have the latest version of the Linux plugin. It just comes with Docker CE, so you don't have to go find it elsewhere. It used to be you had to have Docker Desktop to run this Docker Scan command. Now it's no longer a limitation.
Yep, thanks for mentioning that, Eric. So I'm also the partner solutions architect for Docker, and what we were wanting to do is make container scanning easily available to everybody using Docker's tools. So we collaborated with Docker to construct the Docker scan command, which is using Snyk under the covers to allow you to scan container images without registering for Snyk, without anything.
When you saw us do the scan login at the very beginning to authenticate the Snyk token to it, the only reason we did that is because anonymously you get like 10 scans for without having to do that. Once you attach your free Snyk, I said freak, your freaky Snyk ID, you get, was it 100 or 200? I can't remember the number.
It is 200. Normally, our free tier is for 100 container scans. If you sign up through the Docker desktop integration through Docker Scan, that you get a special free tier limit of 200.
Look at that.
Scans.
Insider info from Tomas.
You got the right people on the call.
Is it possible you can Snyk with a different image registry than Docker Hub? Yes. We have integrations with ECR. Speak of Amazon. And you pretty much, Tomas, I mean, we have integration. If the image is available to pull from somewhere, we can scan it.
Yes, that's correct. As long as the terminal where you're running Docker Scan is authenticated to the container registry where the image lives, then you can scan it. So as long as you've Docker logged in or Scopia login or whatnot, then you have the ability to pull and scan the image.
And there's actually two aspects. One of the things cool things you're going to see what Tomas does is you're going to look at the Snyk UI, the web UI. We have direct integration with Docker Hub, with ECR, with Harbor, if you're running a Harbor on-prem, to where it will not only scan things that are in those registries automatically, but it will do it daily for you. So if a new vulnerability comes up, you'll know about it without even having to have pushed a new image or done a build. Tomas is going to show that from the open source code aspect of this, but that also applies to containers. If it's not an integration we have built into the web UI, you can still definitely, like we just said, you can use the CLI tool to pull it and scan it in your CI systems or wherever you're going to do it. Yes, you can put it in the CI/CD pipeline. In fact, the Docker scan for Linux capability, I was really happy that this got released, because I think that's going to be one of the biggest use cases for it, is having your Docker already in whatever CI agent that you're running. You can now do a scan without having to have an additional tool, as long as you're running Docker CE.
Outside of image scan, can we have Snyk scan Git repos for secrets? So you can connect Snyk to your Git repository. We don't do outright secret scanning. I can talk, if we have time at the end of the workshop, about our static analysis product Snyk code. There are some checkers in our SAST tool that look for hard-coded credentials and things like that, but formally secret scanning is not an area that we're yet supporting within our platform, but it is coming. It's a good question. Okay, and we'll get started with module 3 in 1 minute. Ooh, this is exciting. This is going to be the coolest module. Sorry, Eric. Sorry, Peter.
It is. I'll give you that.
Gotta say, like, this is gonna blow everybody's socks off.
I didn't have a cool hat to wear either.
You know, don't tell anybody that's listening in on the workshop, but the hat's only there to cover up quarantine hair. Shh. Beautiful. Hey, mods, can we fire off a poll to see if everybody's good on module 2? We didn't get any more questions. So Eric, I think your instructions were flawless. I think we're just about ready to hop into module 3. Look at that look of confidence. Yeah. I see.
I'm just glad my microphone held up.
Right. So we'll get started with module 3 in just a minute. I'm just about getting everything ready on my end. So we're going to be playing with a lot in module 3. We're going to be playing with GitHub. We're going to be playing with Snyk. We're going to be doing quite a few things. So without further ado, let me split my screens. Let me quit Slack so that I don't get pinged in the middle of this demonstration. And let me get everything fired up. Start sharing my screen. Let me know if things look good. Let me resize some stuff. Okay. This goes away. This goes away. This goes here. Beautiful. All right. So module 3. So building on what Eric showed you in module 2. In module 2, we found the image magic vulnerability that was introduced as part of the container base image. Now, it's not just the container base image that can introduce open source components into your container. You also, you not only have the container that you're packaging stuff into, which is your base image, but you also have what you're packaging into the container. So in this case, this will be your code. These will be your application's open source dependencies and anything else that might be necessary to correctly run your application. So for this module, we're going to be looking at vulnerabilities introduced not by the base image, but by our application. And we're going to do this by first importing our repository into Snyk. So in step 9, we're actually going to start interacting with the Snyk user interface. If this is your first time using Snyk, it might look a lot like the one I have right now, totally empty. And you first have to get started by configuring your GitHub integration. You need to tell Snyk, where does your code live? Now, so to do that, you go to the integrations panel inside Snyk. I saw the question came up earlier, do we support other container registries than Docker Hub? This is what Eric was referring to. You can connect Snyk directly to your container registry in order to monitor the images in your registry for vulnerabilities. This is part of how we also let you know if any new vulnerabilities have been disclosed for your container images. But for today, we're going to be operating entirely within the realm of source control. We need to connect Snyk to our GitHub repository. So in my case, I've already configured it because I use GitHub to sign into Snyk. But if this is your first time using Snyk, you'll go to integrations, you'll click your GitHub integration. It will ask you for your GitHub username and password, and you'll authenticate with GitHub. Then once your GitHub is authenticated, you'll be able to come to the projects page within Snyk and select the Add Projects button. Of course, it's going to ask you, where's your code? And then find the GitHub repository that we just created. In this case, mine is called Goof. So if you called your GitHub repository something else, find it with the other name. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and select the Goof repository into Snyk. And what happens when you connect Snyk to the GitHub repository, the first thing Snyk does is it'll list the contents of that repository. It'll look for open source package manager manifest files, such as a package.json for a Node app, or a pom.xml for a Java app, or a requirements.txt for a Python application. It'll also look for Docker files to do some of the scanning that Eric demonstrated earlier, where we provided the Docker file to get our base image suggestions. So it'll look for package manager manifest files. It'll look for Docker files. It'll look for infrastructure as code templates. They're out of scope for this particular workshop, but Terraform files, Helm charts, and Kubernetes manifests, we'll see them once the import completes. And then we'll also see, and if you have the static analysis checks enabled, you'll see your custom files, your custom code files. In this case, we only need the package manager manifest file from our Goof application. So we'll go ahead and import the Goof repository into Snyk. Of course, in case the demo gods are not with me, I'm going to go ahead and refresh my screen just to be safe. Ah, look, they're all there. The demo gods are with me after all. And so this is what we're calling out in the instructions. These are all the files that I mentioned that Snyk has found. It identified the issues that are introduced by the Docker file, by the package.json file in our image app, or by our app. So in this case, we're going to be working with the package.json file from our primary application. But before we dive into that, let's exploit a vulnerability in the container just to see some of the risks that a vulnerable open source component can introduce into our code base. So heading into step 10, the very first thing that we need to do, much like we did for the previous exploit, is we need to tell the scripts we're going to be running where to find the application. So we're going to take the Goof load balancer that Eric added as an environment variable earlier and set it to Goof host. So now we're going to have an environment variable called Goof host. Then inside our working directory, there's a directory called exploits. There's quite a few different exploits in here. So in case after this demonstration, you're interested in playing around with some of these other exploits, feel free to. Every exploit in here is a real live exploit against this application. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to be using the exploits introduced by a package called st into our code. And what this has done, just to show you what this is actually, what the file that we just sourced is, what we're doing is we're setting a bunch of aliases. So if I can't open the file view in the side, that's okay. I'll just cat it. Why not? So we're setting a bunch of aliases. So we're going to be able to run st1, st2, st3. And what this is doing is it's going to send some curl commands to the endpoint of our running application. So to see those in action, you just run st1. Okay, that looks pretty sane. You do st2. It's like, uh-oh, now I can actually see some directories, what's going on. Like st3, get some more information out. By the time you get to st4 and st5, now you get to see some serious implications of what this is leaking. st5 leaks the content of the etc password file in our container. Obviously not a good thing. So you might be, now, how do we fix this? Well, as a developer, you can either find what in the code base of the st package introduced this particular vulnerability, and then try to address and fix the st package. But in this case, this is a known vulnerability that we can see just by scanning our repository with Snyk. So to do that, let's head back into Snyk. And let me get Zoom out of the way because it's in my way. So we'll head back into Snyk. We'll go into the package.json file. These are the JavaScript dependencies for the application that we have deployed into EKS. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the search functionality to find this particular vulnerability that we just exploited. So before I do, each of these is a separate card for a vulnerability. These are all separate issues in our application, but we just want one. We want the directory traversal vulnerability that we just exploited. We can see it here. This is a medium severity vulnerability. That's a directory traversal vulnerability. It was fixed in version 0.2.5 of the st package. So as a developer, I don't have to fix the st library. This has already been fixed in a newer version of the library. So to get this into my code so that this vulnerability is no longer exploited, I have two options. I can either go into my IDE, open my package.json file, replace the dependency, and rebuild and repush my application. Or I can save a couple of steps and I can ask Snyk to fix this vulnerability for me by opening a pull request. So what Snyk is effectively doing is once we select open the fix pull request, it's going to check out our code. It's going to edit the package.json file from version 0.2.4 to version 0.2.5. It's going to create a new branch against our GitHub repository, and it's going to submit the new package.json and the new lock file for that package.json. We can see that difference here in the diff view for the pull request as a new branch called snyk-fix random character number. This ties in really nicely if you have any automation built up for your GitHub repository. If you have CI tests that do unit, functional, and regression testing as part of every pull request, all your CI tests will run. You'll be able to use that to know, okay, this isn't introducing a breaking change into my code base, and use that as confidence. Now, if you don't have CI tests, which is okay, not a lot of people do, Snyk is going to do its very best to tell you if this component upgrade introduces a breaking change. And we do this by part of the work that our security team, Eric, mentioned earlier. We analyze when we open a pull request, what are the chances of that pull request getting merged? And then what are the chances of that pull request getting rolled back? And we look at that information to discern and let you know if we believe this is going to introduce a breaking change in your code base. In this case, I'm going to trust Snyk. Snyk says it's not going to break anything. So after we've reviewed the pull request, then we can go ahead and safely merge it. Sure, why not? Let's upgrade the st package from 0 to 4 and 0 to 5. And let's delete the branch. We no longer need that in there. So once that's been merged, we'll head over to our last step. What we want to do, let me clear this. We want to pull the latest version of our code from GitHub. In this case, you can see that we pulled our new package log file and our new package.json file. If we cat that file, we can see that whoops, that'll be, smart Tomas. If we pack it, we can see that the ST file has, dependency has been upgraded to 0.2.5. Awesome, that makes us feel pretty good. And what we'll do then now is rebuild the container image. So we'll do our Docker build. And this is just gonna build the image with the latest version of the ST package. So once the build completes, we're gonna then push it to Docker Hub. And then once that completes, we're gonna be able to test if the exploit against our running application still works. If it doesn't work, then hooray, we fixed the vulnerability in our package. So while all this works, just making sure, have we gotten any questions in or anything, since I can't see the chat that we can address?
We have a question coming in asking, Jay Weaver asks, does the PR feature work with Bitbucket?
Yes, it does. And we actually are very, very excited too. We launched a special integration with Bitbucket Cloud. So if you're using the cloud version of Bitbucket, look up what Snyk and Atlassian are doing together to improve the security experience within Bitbucket Cloud. But if you're not using Bitbucket Cloud, then we do have the ability to connect to Bitbucket Cloud and Bitbucket Server and do this PR functionality that you're seeing. So great question. Ooh, I need to do Docker login. I'm not logged in. Smart. I'm gonna pause my screen share real quick so you can't see my passwords. But that was a great question. Any other ones that have come in?
Not yet.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm authenticating with Docker Hub right now. Docker login -u. Right. All right. So now I'm authenticated with Docker Hub. I'm going to resume my screen share. There we go. So let's push the image to Docker Hub. Beautiful. Terminal is being shared. Anybody else in here with me?
That's me. I'll close my browser.
Okay. So we can see the new goof image was created about a minute ago. That's the one that we just pushed into Docker Hub. The only thing I need to verify, because we have been using a shared terminal for the majority of this workshop.
I think you just need to drag that. Yeah, there you go.
Yep. Is I need to make sure that the correct, what's going on? Why can't I see this? There we go. And you make sure the right Docker ID is in here. That way I'm not breaking anything. So you could tell we practiced this workshop quite a few times. We know where all the things are likely to break. All right. And let's redeploy our application. So kubectl. It was, what is it, the one that you did? kubectl delete.
-f, not exploits, manifests.
You're right. So that'll delete our application from the cluster. And this, then we're going to redeploy the application to the cluster once we get the.
Yeah, this will take a moment. I think it's deprovisioning the LBs.
Got it.
That's a guess.
The expected result, once we redeploy the application, and I wish I didn't have this in the instructions because it's a total spoiler alert. But once the application is scaled down and scaled back up and it's redeployed with our new container image, the ST exploit will no longer work. It will fail spectacularly. And just with that, you have a slightly more secure application than you used to have. So you may have already beaten me to that step because there were less steps on your end. But with that, let's kubectl get all. Beautiful. Okay. Let me double check this. You don't have to do this step. This is just because we
get all again because your goof service is still, or deployment is still 0 of 1.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still container creating. That's fine.
Yeah.
There you go.
So now Like if you run the
DNS.
yes, so if you run the exploits, it should all fail spectacularly, and you should no longer be able to see the contents of the etc password file when you run the exploit against your application. So with that, I want to take a pause because I know there's a lot we went through. Let me recap real quick what we did. We connected our GitHub repository into Snyk. We went into Snyk. We looked at the list of vulnerabilities within the Snyk project. We found the vulnerability that we had exploited. In this case, it's a directory traversal vulnerability, which now that we've created a pull request and fixed it, we no longer see it within the Snyk UI for the ST package. Once we found it, we opened a pull request. That took us to GitHub. We were able to verify the changes that Snyk was proposing to fix the vulnerability. We merged that change into our code base, went back to our Cloud9 environment, pulled the latest version of the code, redeployed the application, and now the exploit no longer works. So I want to take a poll. Moderators, if we could please poll the audience, make sure that they were able to follow along, do this, are they stuck? And because if everything worked correctly, congratulations, you have reached the end of this workshop. And you got to see a little bit of how you can use a managed environment such as AWS Cloud9 to work on your code and have a consistent environment, whether not having to deal with environment drift or not having to deal with the works on my computer problem. Everything runs in a container, so we were able to predictably write instructions that everybody was going to follow flawlessly. We cloned an application, we built some containers, we pushed them to Docker Hub, we exploited some vulnerabilities, we fixed the vulnerabilities, and hopefully you were able to see how together, Snyk, Docker, and Amazon are enabling the container images to be built securely from the start. Now that we've reached the end of the workshop, we're still here in case you need us or in case you haven't fully caught up toward the end yet. So please let us know if you have any questions, if you have any doubts, any remaining questions. We're here for you.
Jay Weaver asked about cost. Everything we've shown today is in our free tier.
Yes.
There was no charge for anything. There are limits. There are some rate limits we put on things. If you go to snyk.io and look at the products page, you'll see the different tiers and what's available. There is one feature we didn't show because it's not free, where we can actually run inside your Kubernetes clusters, including AKS, and monitor deployments as they come in and show you both vulnerabilities in the images deployed as well as some common deployment security context and other kinds of configuration errors. Another thing we didn't show today that is part of the free tier is IAC scanning. Tomas touched on it, but we can scan your Kubernetes manifests for known issues that are problematic, as well as Terraform and
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, Eric. So you're right, it was out of scope for this workshop, but everything we showed today is available with the Snyk free plan. And part of that is you will be able to scan your YAMLs. We modified one of these files. There's still a lot that we can do. So Snyk will identify things like, are you setting your CPU and memory limits? Are you running as roots? Are you running with the default set of capabilities? So there's a lot of stuff that Snyk can do with the files that it imported that we did not cover in today's workshop. But if you are curious, go ahead and play with Snyk. This is all available as part of the free plan. So I will do a question from Prantik. Can you please show how to add multiple GitHub repositories into Snyk? Absolutely. So within the Snyk user interface, when you add a project, once your GitHub is connected, this is the same experience for Bitbucket and for GitLab and for Azure repos. Just these are all the GitHub organizations that I have access to. And so within the GitHub organization, just select all the boxes for all the repositories that you'd like to import. You can import as little or as many repositories as you want. If they are open source, meaning they're not private repositories, the Snyk free tier allows you to test your open source projects unlimited number of times. So you have unlimited tests. for open source projects. It's only when you're
Looks like
running. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tomas. It looks like he modified his question and is saying GitHub accounts, multiple GitHub accounts.
Ooh, there you go. That's a different question entirely. So currently there's a restriction inside Snyk that we can have one GitHub integration configured per organization. So if you have multiple GitHub accounts or multiple GitHub instances or teams, make sure the service account that you use to configure your GitHub authentication is enabled for all the repositories that you'd like to bring in. So for example, in the add project screen, these are all different GitHub accounts: Snyk, Snyk Labs, Snyk Partners. And I've used the service account that is a member of all these different organizations. And that's why I can import them all into Snyk. So it's all about the user token that you use to authenticate the GitHub integration. If you use one that is a member of all your orgs, you'll see all your orgs in the import screen. Great question.
Yeah, I think that's and I don't know anything about Snyk integration, but the idea is kind of same with Docker Hub, right? You have your login and then you're given access to different. So that's what Thomas is talking about. Same thing with Docker. If you connect in to multiple GitHub, use the service account, make sure it has access to everything.
Yes. So
awesome.
Is there a way to reset the account and start over? So the biggest thing you would have to do if you would decide to start over, just delete the Cloud9 EC2 instance and start over from there. Since most of the steps we're doing are inside Cloud9, as soon as you delete that VM, it's all gone and you'll be able to start from scratch. The other things that you would have to do are to delete the GitHub repo that you created as part of the workshop. So go to your GitHub, delete the goof repo, and start over with the template. Because if you did the module 3 for the fixed pull request and you don't delete the repo, when you replay it, the workshop, the exploit will not work. So make sure that you recreate the GitHub repository as well if you're going to start everything over. Again, thank you all for attending. Thank you for the participation. AWS team, Docker team, thank you for the collaboration. Everybody that attended, thank you for the participation. And we look forward to working with all of you again.